And while the battlefield in Russia-Ukraine war has been confined thus far to Moscow's pro-democracy neighbor to the west, the reverberations of the conflict are really being felt across the globe, and the U.S. diplomatic campaign surrounding the war is also a global effort. Joining us now with more on this part of the story is our chief White House correspondent, James Rosen, reporting live for us this afternoon from Washington and our newsroom there. James.
Bianca, good afternoon. The White House announced this morning that President Biden will tomorrow conduct another virtual summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said in a statement the session is part of ongoing efforts to maintain open lines of communication and will focus on, quote, managing the competition between the two countries, as well as areas of, quote, mutual concern, including the Russia-Ukraine war. The two leaders last met virtually in November. On Monday, however, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met in Rome with this man, Yang Jiechi, a longtime foreign policy advisor to Xi Jinping, for what one senior U.S. official called an intense set of talks that lasted 7 hours, and in which Sullivan conveyed to Yang, quote, deep concerns about China's alignment with Russia and the potential implications and consequences of certain actions, unquote.
What we've been conveying is that rhetorical support or the clear rhetorical lack of denunciation of what Russia is doing flies in the face of what China stands for, including basic principles of the UN Charter, including the basic principle of respect for sovereignty of nations. And that's just a statement of fact. Obviously, our objective and what we'll watch closely is, and I don't have an update on it from here, is any decision to provide additional support to Russia while they're invading a foreign country.
New satellite imagery published by Maxar Technologies, the Colorado-based intelligence firm whose timely images have made them the industry leader during this conflict, captured a squadron of Russian helicopters destroyed on an airfield in Kherson. While not granting every military request from the Zelensky government, the White House argues the president has helped make Ukrainian successes like this one possible through the shipments and the aid he has provided.
He was speaking from his heart and speaking from what he's seen on television, which is barbaric actions by a brutal dictator through his invasion of a foreign country. There is a legal process that continues to be underway at the State Department. That's a process that they would have any updates on.
All right, that was Jen Psaki addressing President Biden's remarks earlier yesterday that he now considers Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Finally, President Biden conducted a virtual meeting this morning with the Taoiseach, Irish Prime Minister Micheál Martin, who was seated across the street in Blair House due to the fact that Martin tested positive for COVID yesterday. Bianca.
James, thank you for that report. We appreciate it. And joining me now is former Pennsylvania Senator and Newsmax contributor Rick Santorum. Rick, great to have you with me today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bianca.
Well, a lot to get to. I want to ask you first, what were your thoughts on Zelensky's impassioned address yesterday? He had even more passionate words for Berlin lawmakers today. You know, obviously, as we just heard from James, he didn't get everything he asked for, but he's trying. The no-fly zone, the MiGs. What did you think of his emotion yesterday to members of Congress?
I thought it was a terrific address. It obviously hit a lot of American themes, which he seems to be doing at every country he goes to. He's a performer. Before he was president, and he's performing. He was an actor, and he's doing a good job. I mean, one of the things you look back on and you see the greatness of Ronald Reagan was the fact that he knew how to deliver a speech and deliver lines, and Zelensky is the same way. And I think he's now convincing members of Congress that Ukraine can actually win this war. And I know people may shake their head at that, but I think there is a real possibility that, given the appropriate support from the international community, the United States in particular, if he has the weapons that he needs, he can not only hold off the Russians, but hold them off to the point where they're just stuck and slogged, and at some point they sue for peace.
Right.
I think that's what we're hoping, and so I think that's actually very possible at this point.
Well, you know, we're giving $1 billion in aid just this week alone from the U.S., so obviously the weapons are on their way. Rick, what about what's really a chaotic foreign policy we've been seeing from the White House? It's proven to be a failure in Afghanistan, really now in Ukraine. Now we see Biden heading to Brussels for a NATO summit next week. A call has been set between Biden and China's President Xi. I mean, is there a real strategy here? What are your thoughts on how this is all going down?
I mean, the only discernible strategy is that the Biden administration believes that you appease those who are your enemies and you turn your back on your friends. And that's been the consistent, drumbeat out of the Biden administration. You didn't even mention Iran. I mean, here we are in war with, supporting a war against Russia, and he is conspiring with the Russians and giving them relief from sanctions with respect to Iran to get a piece of paper from a despotic regime that's the biggest purveyor of terror in the world, and for what? So they can be a nuclear power someday. It's not going to stop them from being nuclear, but it's just going to, quote, delay them. The reality is that Joe Biden's policies, and I heard your comment, the comment by Jim Rosen about the talk with the Chinese delegate in Rome with the National Security Advisor. I mean, the idea that they are talking tough would be the first time they've talked tough to anybody that's an opponent of the United States. They don't talk tough. They don't act tough. And no one believes they are going to be tough, and that's the problem. Is that nobody really respects the threat of the United States because Joe Biden, not only in the year or so he's been president, but throughout his entire career as senator and vice president, has always been let's just say, very soft on those who are tough against the United States.
Rick, I'm staying with Iran for a second. You know, there's talk the administration is considering removing Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps from a terror blacklist in return for a public commitment from Iran to de-escalate in that region. I mean, we just saw Iran firing missiles into Iraq near the U.S. consulate on Saturday. Israel is very concerned about what this means. It seems insane that we would go forward with a deal with Iran with what we know from who they are and what they want to do.
Here's what I would just say to anybody who thinks that this is a good idea. Name one agreement Iran has ever lived up to. The answer, I'll save you the research, none. They have never lived up to anything. The previous agreement that the Obama administration put in place, they violated it. They continue to enrich uranium. They continue to develop ballistic missile technology. One of many reasons the Trump administration abandoned it was because it was not verifiable.
Right.
They weren't letting inspectors in. This is a huge mistake. It's a fatal flaw of a man like Joe Biden who wants international organizations to lead the world and not the United States, and you end up with a bunch of paper that isn't worth the paper, isn't worth a bunch of printing which isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Rick, last question. We have just about 20 seconds here. Biden off the cuff comment yesterday after his press conference calling Putin a war criminal. Why then? Why say that? You see Psaki rolling back. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. That was a Trumpian moment. I mean, that would be something you would expect Donald Trump to say. I mean, he's more spontaneous. I know that's not the proper thing for the president to say, but I'm glad he said it. I think it's one of those things we have to start getting tougher. And Biden in these kinds of formats that he has when he's pairing with reporters, that's the time you see a tough Joe Biden. And so it sort of came out in that moment. It's not surprising it did.
Rick Santorum, appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Bianca.